Yo, what's good? We're back. Another episode of the Warrior Ethos. Citations for valor. Decorations for valor, from ancient days to modern, have seldom been awarded for raw bloodthirstiness or the brute act of producing carnage. The feat that inspires witnesses to honor it. I'm going to restart on that sentence, I'm sorry. The feat that inspires witnesses to honor it is almost invariably one of selflessness. The hero, though virtually no recipient chooses to call himself by that name, often acts as much to preserve his comrades as he does to deliver destruction onto the foe. In citations, we read these paragraphs again and again, disregarding his own safety, with no thought for his own life. Though wounded numerous times and in desperate need of care for himself. Selflessness. The group comes before the individual. Chapter 16. Follow me. During the 6-day war, the Yom Kippur War, and all of Israel's subsequent conflicts, casualties sustained by officers have exceeded proportionally by far those suffered by men of the enlisted ranks. Why? Because the primary leadership principle that Israeli forces are taught is follow me. During the Sinai campaign of 1956, the commander of an Israeli armored regiment violated orders and attacked down the length of the Milta Pass, sacrificing numerous men and vehicles to capture a strongpoint that was later given up. Despite public outrage at this act of insubordination, the Israeli commander-in-chief, General Moshe Dayan, refused to discipline the man. I will never punish an officer for daring too much, but only too little. In the historic clashes of the Granicus River, Isis and Gaugamela, Alexander the Great's order of battle ran like this. Allied horse on the left, infantry phalanx in the center, silver shields to their right, then the elite companion cavalry. At the head of this 1,600-man detachment rode Alexander himself on his warhorse, Bucephalus, wearing a double-plumed helmet that could be seen by every man in the army. He led the charge in person and prided himself on being the first to strike the enemy. This is the concept of leading by example, but it also embodies the ancient precept that killing the enemy is not honorable unless the warrior places himself equally in harm's way and gives the enemy an equal chance to kill him. The samurai code of Bushido forbade the warrior from approaching an enemy by stealth. Honor commanded that he show himself plainly and permit the foe a fighting chance to defend himself. During the North African campaign of 1940 to 1942, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel led from so far forward that 3 times he either drove or flew himself smack among the British enemy and escaped only by blind luck and wild daring. Rommel's aggressiveness was matched by his sense of fair play and honor. A company of the Afrika Korps had surrounded a British artillery battery and was demanding its surrender. The German captain had captured an English officer named Desmond Young with a gun in his hand, and the captain commanded Young to order his men to give themselves up. Young refused. At this moment, Rommel chanced to come upon the scene of his staff car. The captain explained the situation, certain that Rommel, his commanding general, would back him up. Instead, the Desert Fox ordered the captain to put away his weapon and to cease demanding of his British prisoner that he order his own men to surrender. Such an act, Rommel said, runs counter to the honorable conventions of war. He ordered his captain to find some other solution, while he himself took the Englishman Young aside and shared with him cool water and tea from his own canteen. Desmond Young, a few years later, authored Rommel the Desert Fox, the first great biography of the Afrika Korps commander. Chapter 17. The Joys of Misery. Among all elite US forces, the Marine Corps is unique in that its standards for strength, athleticism, and physical hardiness are not exceptional. What separates Marines instead is their capacity to endure adversity. Marines take a perverse pride in having colder chow, crappier equipment, and higher casualty rates than any other service. This notion goes back to Belleau Wood and earlier, but it came into its own during the exceptionally bloody and punishing battles at Tarawa and Iwo Jima, the Chosin Reservoir and Khe Sanh. Marines take pride in enduring hell. Nothing infuriates Marines more than to learn that some particularly nasty and dangerous assignment has been given to the Army instead of them. It offends their sense of honor. This is the key element of the warrior ethos, the willing and eager embracing of adversity. In 1912, In 1912, the Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton was seeking volunteers for an expedition to the South Pole. He placed the following ad in the London Times. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. The next morning, 5,000 men lined up to volunteer. The payoff for a life of adversity is freedom. There's a story of the tribes in ancient Afghanistan when Alexander was preparing to invade the wild lands of the Scythians in 333 BC. A tribal delegation came to him and warned him, for his own good, to stay away. In the end, the Scythes told Alexander, "You and your army will come to grief, as all other invaders have in the past, including your friend Cyrus the Great, who was killed north of Mazar-i Sharif, and whose body was never recovered. You may defeat us," said the tribal elders, "but you will never defeat our poverty." What the Scythians meant was that they could endure greater adversity even than Alexander and his Macedonians. When the Spartans and their allies overcame the Persians at Plataea in 479 BC, the spoils included the great pavilion tents of King Xerxes, along with the king's cooks, wine stewards, and kitchen servants. For a joke, the Spartan king Pausanias ordered the Persian chefs to prepare a typical dinner, the kind they would make for the Persian king. Meanwhile, he had his own cooks whip up a standard Spartan meal. The Persian chefs produced a lavish banquet, composed of multiple courses served on golden plates and topped off by the most sumptuous cakes and delicacies. The Spartan grub was barley bread. Sorry, my phone turned off, which means that it's going to affect the recording. I apologize. The Spartans' grub was barley bread and pig's blood stew. When the Spartans saw the two meals side by side, they burst out laughing. "How far the Persians have travelled," declared Pausanias, "to rob us of our poverty." Chapter 18. Duty, Honor, Country. If shame is the negative, honor is the positive. Nang in Pashto is honor. Nangwali is the code of honor by which the Pashtun tribal warrior lives. Bushido is the samurai code. Every tattoo parlor adjacent to a US Marine base has this in innumerable design variants. Death before dishonor. In warrior cultures, from Sayu and the Comanche to the Zulu and the mountain Pashtun, honor is the man's most prized possession. Without it, life is not worth living. In 413 BC, the Spartans sent a general named Gylippus to help their Sicilian allies in the city of Syracuse, which was under siege by the Athenians. Gylippus's first job was to pick from the civilian population those men who would make the best military officers. Gylippus instructed his lieutenants to seek neither men who craved wealth nor those who sought poverty, but to only select those who sought honor. Honor under tribal codes is a collective imperative. If a man receives an insult to his honor, the offense is felt by all males in the family. All are mutually bound to avenge the affront. The American brand of honor is inculcated on the football field, in the locker room, and in the street. Back down to no one, avenge every insult, never show fear, never display weakness, play hurt, never quit. At Thermopylae, in 480 BC, the Persian king Xerxes, at the head of an army of 2 million men, demanded of the Spartan king Leonidas that he and his 4,000 defenders lay down their arms. Leonidas responded in 2 words, molon labe, come and take them. If you travel to Thermopylae today, you will see the Leonidas monument. It only has 2 words on it. The American Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe went Leonidas one better. Surrounded by the Germans at Bastogne in World War II, the commander of the 101st Airborne replied to the enemy's demand to surrender with 1 word, nuts. Warrior cultures employ honor, along with shame, to produce courage and resolve in the hearts of their young men. Honor is the psychological salary of any elite unit. Pride is the possession of honor. Honor is connected to many things, but one thing it's not connected to is happiness. In honor cultures, happiness, as we think of it, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, is not a recognized good. Happiness in honor cultures is the possession of unsullied honor. Everything else is secondary. In the West, pride and honor are anachronistic these days. The practitioners of honor are often ridiculed in popular culture. Like Jack Nicholson's Marine Colonel in A Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth. Or Robert Duvall in Apocalypse Now, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. The will to victory. When Alexander was a boy, a party of traders came to Pella, the Macedonian capital, selling trained war horses. Came to Macedonia, the capital, selling trained war horses. Philip the king and all his officers went down to the plain to put these mounts through their paces. One horse, called Bucephalus, was by far the fastest, strongest, and bravest, but he was so wild that no one could ride him. Alexander watched as his father let the steed go without making an offer. "What a fine mount you lose, father," he said, "for want of a spirit to ride him." At this, the king and all his officers laughed. "And what will you pay for this horse, my son, if you can ride him?" "All of my prince's inheritance." So they let the boy try. Now Alexander had noticed something about the horse that no one else had, that the beast was spooked by its own shadow. So he took Bucephalus's bridle and turned him to face the sun. Then little by little, speaking to him gently and stroking his neck, he succeeded in quieting the steed down. Next, with a quick leap, he sprung onto the horse's back. Philip and the officers watched in breathless trepidation as the prince took this fiery mount out onto the track and spurred him into the gallop. Would the horse throw Alexander, trample him, or break his neck? Alexander coolly brought the animal under control and raced him full tilt around the circuit. When he returned to his grandstand, the officers cheered him wildly, while Philip came forward with tears in his eyes and took his son into his arms. Look you for a kingdom far greater than ours, my son, for Macedonia is plainly too small for you." Patton said, "Americans play to win at all times. I wouldn't give a hoot in hell for a man who lost and laughed. That's why Americans have never lost a war and will never lose one." The will to fight, the passion to be great, is an indispensable element of the warrior ethos. It is also a primary quality of leadership because it inspires men and fires their hearts with ambition and passion to go beyond their own limits. Epaminondas, the great Theban general, was the first to beat the Spartans at the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC. The evening before the fight, Epaminondas called his warriors together and declared that he could guarantee victory on the morrow if his men would vow to perform one feat at the moment he commanded it. The men of course responded, "What do you wish us to do?" "When I sound the trumpet," said Epaminondas, "I want you to give me one more foot. Do you understand? Push the enemy back just 1 foot." The men swore they would do this. Battle came, the armies clashed, and locked up shield against shield, each side straining to overcome the other. Epaminondas watched and waited till he judged both armies had reached the extremity of exhaustion. Then he ordered the trumpet sounded. There should have been a comma there, the trumpet sounded. The warriors of Thebes, remembering their promise, summoned their final reserves of strength and pushed the foe back only 1 foot. This was enough. The Spartan line broke. A rout ensued. The will to victory may be demonstrated in places other than the actual battle. A Roman general was leading his legions towards the enemy in a swampy country. He knew that the next day's battle would be fought on a certain plain, because it was the only dry, flat place for miles. He pushed his army all night, marching them through a frightening and formidable swamp, so that they reached the battle site before the foe and could claim the high ground. In the aftermath of victory, the general called his troops together and asked them, "Brothers, when did we win the battle?" One captain replied, "Sir, when the infantry attacked." Another said, "Sir, we won when the cavalry broke." "No," said the general, "we won the battle the night before, when our men marched through the swamp and took the high ground." Chapter 20. Die laughing. The warrior sense of humor is tense, dry, and dark. Its purpose is to deflect fear and to reinforce unity and cohesion. The warrior ethos dictates that the soldier make a joke of pain and laugh at adversity. Here is Leonidas on the final morning at Thermopylae. "Now eat a good breakfast, men, for we'll all be sharing dinner in hell." Spartans like to keep things short. Once, one of their general captured a city. His dispatch home said, "City taken." The magistrates fined him for being verbose. Taken, they said, would have sufficed. The river of Athens is the Ethos. The river in Sparta is the Eurotas. One time, an Athenian and a Spartan were trading insults. "We have buried many Spartans," said the Athenian, "besides the Ephesos." "Yes," replied the Spartan, "but we have buried no Athenians beside Eurotas." Another time, a band of Spartans arrived at a crossroads to find a party of frightened travelers. "You are lucky," the travelers told them. "A gang of bandits was here just a few minutes ago." "We are not lucky," said the Spartan leader. "They were." In Sparta, the law was to keep everything simple. One ordinance decreed that you could not finish a roof beam with any tool finer than a hatchet. So all roof beams in Sparta were basically logs. Once a Spartan was visiting Athens, and his host was showing off his own mansion, complete with finely detailed square roof beams. The Spartan asked the Athenian if trees grew square in Athens. "No, of course not," said the Athenian. But round as trees grow everywhere." "And if they grew square," asked the Spartan, "would you make them round?" Probably the most famous warrior quip of all is that of the Spartan Dianekes at Thermopylae, when the Spartans first occupied the pass. They had yet to see the army of the Persian invaders. They had heard that it was big, but they had no idea how big. The Spartans were preparing their defensive positions. A native of Trachis, the site of the pass, came racing into camp, out of breath and wide-eyed with terror. He had seen the Persian horde approaching. As the tiny contingent of defenders gathered around, the man declared that the Persian multitude was so numerous that when their archers fired their volleys, the massive arrows blocked out the sun. "Good," declared Dianekes. "Then we'll have our battle in the shade." Several aspects of this quip and Leonidas' remark about sharing dinner in hell are worth noting. First, they're not jokes. They're dead on, but they're not delivered for laughs. Second, they don't solve the problem. Neither remark offers hope or promises of a happy ending. They're not inspirational. The deliverers of these quips don't point to glory or triumph, or seek to allay their comrades' anxiety by holding out the prospect of some rosy outcome. The remarks confront reality. They say, "Some heavy shit is coming down, brothers, and we're going to go through it." Lastly, these remarks are inclusive. They're about us. Whatever ordeal is coming, the company will undergo it together. Leonidas and Dianekes, quips, draw the individual out of his private terror and yoke him to the group. Even the epitaph of the 300 by the poet Simonides is lean and terse. It leaves out almost every fact about the battle. The antagonists, the stakes, the event, the date, the war, the reason for it all. It assumes that the reader knows it already and brings to it his own emotion. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. The language of the warrior ethos is private. It speaks warrior to warrior and doesn't care if outsiders get it or not. Okay, next we're going to start part 3, Inner Wars. Hope you all enjoyed that, and I'll see you in the next one.